Welcome to Khanversations. I'm Muqtedar Khan, your host, and today I'm introducing you to a new type of programming called Khanclave, where I bring in speakers and experts from as many parts of the world as I possibly can to give you a global and diverse perspective on the issues. So today we're going to talk about the impact of the war on Iran, the US-Israeli war with Iran, on various regions. So we have with us a plethora of experts, very distinguished scholars. We have with us Rafael Marchetti. He is a distinguished professor in one of the most elite universities, Luis University in Rome. He's a very prominent scholar in international relations. For those of you who watch Khanversations regularly, you know that I was doing a lot of shows from Italy the last few days. That was because I was Rafael's guest. He was hosting a conference at his university on global international relations. A very important book is about to come out from there. Then we have with us Winglok Hung, who's joined us from Hong Kong. He's a young, aspiring scholar, very distinguished. The university that he teaches in Hong Kong is one of the best universities in Asia, and he is an expert on IPE and foreign relations, and he will share with us, hopefully, the Chinese perspective on this issue. And then I have Saira Kazmi from Karachi, in Pakistan, Islamabad. She's an expert on geopolitics and international relations, and she will be bringing to us the Pakistani perspective. Pakistan has become quite central to this, at least the negotiations that are going on. And we hear that Donald Trump has just announced that there will be another round of face-to-face dialogue in Islamabad in a couple of days. Then we have my old friend Saeed Sadek, who has been on the show before. In fact, all these speakers have been on Khanversations in the past. Saeed is a very good friend. He's from Cairo. He's a political sociologist, teaches at American University in Cairo, and he's just arrived in Cairo, and so I'm absolutely grateful to him. For those of you who are thinking that I have probably forgotten to include India, I just wanted to let you know that our speaker from India is unwell at the moment, and so she has decided not to join the program because she's unwell, so we wish her all the best. So I'm going to start right away with Rafael Marchetti, and then we will go to Winglok Hung, Saira Kazmi, and then Saeed Sadek. So my first question really is, this war has become a global war, even though it is just US and Israel attacking Iran and Iran responding by attacking these countries' assets and the region. So it became a regional war, but its impact seems to be global. How is it affecting Europe and Italy, Rafael? How do you see from Rome what the bigger implications of this war are?
Good afternoon. Thank you, Muqtedar. Well, I would say there are three dimensions that are particularly important in the Italian and European wide debate: the political, the military, and the economic dimension. Politically, most of the country sooner or later condemned the intervention, the attack. This is considered illegitimate with reference to international law, and international law in Europe is still relevant. So politically, there is no appetite to back and support this intervention. At the same time, of course, European member states and countries have a strong alliance with the US, so it's a kind of, yes, we criticize the intervention, but at the same time, we don't want to break the relation with the US totally. Of course, Trump threatened us, all Europeans, with harsh revenge because we didn't support the attack militarily. So there was this half and half situation, criticizing, but at the same time, unwilling to break totally the relation with the US. Militarily, there was no appetite to support it, despite the fact that a few days ago there was a meeting in Paris setting up a peace building or kind of demining possible initiative in the Gulf after a peace deal is signed. And then the other dimension is the economic dimension. Europe is affected as much as other regions severely because of oil, gas, but also fertilizers and other important elements. This is already affecting the prices in Europe. It's cutting already some, for instance, some flights. And really the prospect for the next coming weeks and months is dark. So there is a very significant worry about the economic implications of this attack.
Raphael, one thing that I was trying to understand with the European position, while I understand that this is not their war, they don't want to go to war with the United States, but they also don't want to break away from the United States. The relations are too strong and too deep and too overlapping on many issues. It's not just about security and NATO. But is this, in the past, what Europeans did when they didn't like what America was doing was to say, oh, we support you, but not actively participate. But this time, I think Europe is trying to deny Donald Trump any legitimacy. Is that, do you agree with me by saying that they have denied Donald Trump a legitimacy which he could not get from the UN Security Council, but could have got from support from Europe?
Yes, this is the case. Europe is not providing any legitimacy. Bear in mind, for instance, in the case of Venezuela, for some strange reason, some government, including the Italian government, somehow said, okay, maybe this is a legitimate intervention, but not in the case of Iran. So there is no appetite at all to provide a political legitimacy to this intervention. Funny enough, or interesting enough, the whole discussion is about the US. Very little discussion about Israel, which is in itself an interesting aspect. Of course, there was a lot of discussion for the war in Gaza and to some extent in Lebanon, but it seems as if the only one attacking Iran now is the US. The whole discussion is about Trump and the US. Very little about Netanyahu, who is, in fact, I mean, according to many European analysts, really the primary source of this.
Is it because they are also trying to protect Israel's image in Europe by blaming?
No, I don't think so. It has to do with the fact that, of course, US is the prominent counterpart. For us, Israel is way less important. Yes, of course, there are Jewish communities in Italy and in Europe that are supporting this. But on the overall, the issue is how to deal with this American problem.
I want to come to Winglok Hung. He's a good friend of mine. For those of you who remember, I went on a tour of China and South Korea, and I was basically Winglok held my hand through the entire trip. I could not have navigated China without Winglok. So welcome to Khanversations, Winglok. And I want to know how how China is looking at this. You know, there was a lot of expectations that China is now a rising power. I think if Soviet Union was around, then perhaps even Trump would not have attempted this war. But China, a more powerful country than what Soviet Union ever was, still is not. China's view is not deterring America from doing whatever it wants to do, whenever it wants to do, wherever it wants to do. So, what's the perspective? How are the Chinese looking at this? And especially after the blockade. So the blockade has two targets, Iran and China, because it's preventing Iranian oil from coming to China, which is about 15%, 13% of Chinese oil.
Yeah. Well, Professor Fan, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation. Well, I think after the war has started, most Chinese scholars here, I think, focus more on talking about that is actually talk about the potential collapse of the US-built international order, particularly in the Middle East as well. And also follow up, of course, talking about the declining power of the US, not even just in the Middle East, but also talking about the global hegemony. That is a main focus point. Particularly, that is you can also see when the war first started, maybe a few will question whether there will be a regime change. But after that, you can also see the resilience from the Iran, so that, we're also talking about, that is, I think most Chinese scholar here, that is, Iran perhaps already discovered a way that they can even fight against, the US. And also they started to analyze the military strength of the US. And finally, find that perhaps also talk about the asymmetric way of war, particularly talk about not just the traditional security dimension, but also, for example, nowadays using drones to target public facilities, or even talk about luxury hotels as well. So I think this is first of all very important. And then perhaps a few we're also talking about, even Chinese scholar, maybe you can also let me know more. That is, the US seems to us that is making a serious mistakes. That is, that is even losing its soft power, and also that is even talk about the perhaps that is the regional supremacy, that is in the Middle East as well. So so far, I think I'm not particularly sure in the US, but at least in Hong Kong, or even I read several report, maybe some even go to quite extreme, already saying that US is losing the war, now as well. So they will also talk about even the global order looks like after, perhaps if the war in Iran will end this month or even next month as well. And of course, you talk about the blockade, but you can also understand that I think probably that is in the past few years, China has already speed up the process of so-called finding out new energy, or even talk about the digital transformation as well. So that is, I believe nowadays, China is also analyzing, the economic loss as well. But I believe that is they are quite proud of their sales using, for example, electric cars, or even some other alternatives as well. So while, others just like Europe, or even, Japan, or even other countries as well, actually the cost is getting higher, particularly talk about the global market as well. So far, I believe China is quite confident. Of course, all will suffer, no one will be the so-called, I think that is, would like to see the war continue. But so far, I think that would say that is, China has been analyzing the war, and I believe, China's believe that it also has several comparative advantages, compared with other great powers, particularly, and talk about the so-called as a rising power. Perhaps, well, the next we'll talk about whether China will also replace the US to be the so-called number one in the world, because you are also losing the alliance, and also, well, suffer a lot, from this war as well. I think that would be, as far as I know, I'm not pretty sure that would be the dominant view of a Chinese scholar, but at least some believe that will happen very soon.
So basically, they are looking at this war as an instrument that can reduce the power differential between the US and China. So as you know, that I've been doing like nearly 2 shows a day in 2 different languages on this war. So some Chinese scholars, very prominent scholars in China, sent me a critique of what I was doing. And they said that I was missing the most important point of this war. And they said, this war is not about Iran. This is not about Israel. This war is about China and cutting off China's access to cheap energy. And so they see it in conjunction with what happened in Venezuela. So I went and looked, and I actually did a show on this, and I discovered that about 3% of Chinese oil was coming from Venezuela at $20 discount. So instead of paying 65, which was the price before the war, they were just paying about 40, and about 13-14% was coming from Iran, and they were getting $5 to $10 discount from Iran. So this Chinese scholar who was criticizing me, he was saying that, Dr. Khan, you're missing the point. I think America is trying to cut off China's access to cheap energy so that the manufacturing advantage that China has over Europe and the US will become less. But I think if the price of oil goes up, it will affect Europe also. It will affect manufacturing everywhere. So the advantage that China has in manufacturing will remain. So is that something you find credible, a critique?
Well, that is all I said because I believe that that is even all will suffer, from talk about economic loss as well. And that is, and talk about relatively advantages, because this is so-called the global market as well. So in the end, I believe, because you're talking about cutting the cheap, energy supply, but actually it happens to all other major powers as well. And so far, you can also see that's why, in the past few years, China has already speed up, using alternative rather than talk about oils or as well. So I believe, that is, that's why, as I said, some Chinese scholar also said they even didn't understand, perhaps if that is targeting at China, maybe the US also making a series of mistakes. But that is, of course, the US side.
Yeah, some Chinese scholars quoted Napoleon, Rafa, who said that
Oh,
when your enemy is making a mistake, don't disturb him. Don't
yeah.
interrupt him when he's making mistakes. So I want to come to Saira in Islamabad. Saira, Pakistan is having a honeymoon time in geopolitics. It has suddenly become quite central. I want to know is Pakistan's view, because I think Pakistan is kind of stuck geopolitically because it is aligned with Saudi Arabia in a defense agreement. And if this war continues, which it could if Donald Trump, messes it up, because there was an escalation in spite of the ceasefire through the blockade. So if the talks fail and the war begins, which Donald Trump has threatened just today, what happens to the Pakistan's role as a mediator and negotiator if Iran again starts attacking Saudi Arabia? Like, how do you see this role of Pakistan, aligned with Saudi Arabia, but also trying to be the mediator?
Thank you so much, sir, for having us today, and thank you so much for bringing all of us on the same table. This is what Pakistan is doing today. When it comes to the actually, when it comes to the Pakistan's honeymoon period, definitely I would love to start from that point actually. Before May 2025, there were different narratives were prevailing in the world about Pakistan. If you know about Pakistan, like Pakistan is a country that is in a permanent chaos, that is in a permanent emergency. Pakistan, debt crisis, political turmoil, and especially more it was very for Pakistan, that Pakistan IMF dependency, and some sort of the narratives were going on. So I don't know why the world could not make a rational analysis and reached a justified conclusion that Pakistan, it's okay, Pakistan economically was not doing very well, and Pakistan was not only the country that was taking the help from that was taking the funds from IMF. There are many other countries, and there are many prominent countries, but at the same time, in September 2024, when Pakistan signed $7 billion agreement, IMF extended fund agreement, soon after 1 month, Pakistan hosted Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit in Islamabad and brought Central Asian governments, Iran, Russia, India, on the same table. So at the same time, when Pakistan was negotiating discounted crude oil from Russia, at the same time Pakistan was involved in phase 2 discussion with China for CPC phase 2 for $62 billion project. So at the same time, when Pakistan's Prime Minister is in the Beijing, same time he is in the Washington, in Ankara, and in Riyadh. So this is I don't think so that this isn't these things are not new for Pakistan. When it comes to the dialogue, Pakistan have been Pakistan negotiated America and China issue in 1971. Pakistan negotiated America-Afghan issue. Pakistan significantly helped America to leave and to go from Afghanistan. So this is in international relations. This is a theory of international relations that is called strategic autonomy in a small state maintain its position while addressing the issues of the major power. So when it comes to the negotiation, and you are asking that what Pakistan will do if the negotiations are not going well. Look, Pakistan is playing the role of a mediator. Pakistan can facilitate them. Pakistan is facilitating their meetings, and Pakistan has helped them a lot. Pakistan isn't helped them a lot. Two countries actually, Pakistan saved this world from the third war. Pakistan as limits. Pakistan as the limits as the all the mediators have. Pakistan can suggest them. Pakistan can, as the mediator, can offer. But if again the second part of your question, so if it negotiation got failed, what Pakistan will do after? So we understand that this was not easy for Pakistan being a mediator while maintaining the balanced relation. But we have seen throughout the history of Pakistan has a very significant history of maintaining the balancing relation with China and America at the same time, and with Iran and Saudi Arabia at the same time. And Pakistan has mediated Iran and Saudi relation in previous time as well. So I think Pakistan is playing very good role. Pakistan is doing what this was the responsibility and this was the job of the United Nations to bring peace to the world. This was actually the job of the United Nations Security Council, what Pakistan is doing. Pakistan is playing well, and I hope Pakistan has its card when it comes. If dialogues are not succeeding, what Pakistan will do.
So, I mean, clearly, Pakistan is probably the only country which is benefiting from this war to some extent, other than Israel, whose relative power over the region is increasing significantly. Regardless of how this war ends, Israel will be the most powerful country unchallenged in the Middle East once the ceasefire is done. The only country which was willing to challenge Israeli domination in the region has been really battered in a major way. So in that sense, one thing that I do want to understand is, if you remember, during the Biden administration, Pakistan was really off the map. I mean, Biden just did not pay any attention to Pakistan at all. And there was this frustration, I think, in Islamabad about how Biden was ignoring Pakistan. So is it advantageous for Pakistan to basically tie its wagon to Donald Trump? So Pakistan's good fortune is directly related to Donald Trump becoming the president and reversing many aspects of it. And he won't be president in 2 more years. So is Pakistan concerned that, or do you think that Pakistan has gained enough from its role right now that it enjoys a high, shall we say, a more enhanced status in international sphere, which will be useful even beyond Trump?
Pakistan, being a Pakistan because of its geographical location, because of Pakistan's geopolitical position, not only during the Joe Biden duration. I remember when Mr. Trump came for the first time in the Oval Office, and during his, I think his first address, he said that Pakistan is safe havens for the terrorists. So I remember that during the Trump era and during the then Joe Biden era, things were not good between Pakistan and global Chaudhary and superpower. But as far as that the Pakistan has gained much during this time, Pakistan, as I already said, that Pakistan is doing much more since a long time. It is long history of Pakistan's efforts to bring peace. When Pakistan was working against the terrorism, Pakistan has joined the war against terrorism. Pakistan working for peace. So Pakistan was not acknowledged rightly. So this is the time that Pakistan has got its position in the world. So you can say prayed are answered.
Yeah, I wonder whether if if it doesn't translate into economic benefits, but it has already translated. Saudi Arabia has paid off, I think, the UAE part of the
Yes,
loan.
Saudi
And
Arabia has paid off. Like now, we are listening that Qatar is going to join us in different.
yeah,
I think we are going to have different economic incentive as well. But geopolitically, Pakistan has gained a lot, and this is the fruit of the 79-year struggle Pakistan struggled.
Saeed, you're still driving, so let's do this. And you are muted right now, so unmute yourself. So Saeed Sadek has just arrived in Cairo. I'm so grateful for him for agreeing to do this. Saeed, uh, everything that Saira was saying about Pakistan, Egypt used to enjoy that position as the main interlocutor of the United States, especially when dealing with crisis in the Middle East. Now Egypt is taking a back seat. In some ways, it might even be to Egypt's advantage because perhaps it doesn't want to look too closely tied to Israel at this moment. So, how do you see this entire war? I mean, everyone says that the Middle East is never going to be the same again. And how does this impact Egypt, and how do Egyptians basically think of this war, Said?
Thanks very much for the invitation and greetings to all my colleagues in this panel. As you know, Egyptian foreign policy since the late Mubarak began to shift toward more domestic issues. The foreign policy under President Sisi is more concerned with the economic development. Somebody pays the debt, attracting investment, so less interest in getting involved in any hot militant politics. In fact, even before this war erupted, Egypt hosted the foreign minister of Iran and coordinated that he meets the head of the IEEE, the International Atomic Agency in Cairo. They tried to mediate all this tension that was rising. Again, the motivation also is Egyptian economic interest. The number one source foreign currency for the Egyptians, $41.5 billion a year, comes from 5 million Egyptians in the Gulf. If you look at tourism, I get only $16 billion. The Suez Canal since Gaza conflict and the Yemeni house is now, you used to get $10 billion. Today, we are lucky if we get $30 million. So if you want to understand Egyptian foreign policy, you have to look at the economic interests they are after. So it was not in their interest that there is a Gulf. They always looked at the Gulf to save them fast cash, if they want investment. And so all of those factors made Egypt work trying to mediate. And that was taken by the Gulf state that we have taken sides with Iran, which is not true. When the revolution in Iran erupted in 1979, Egypt hosted the Shah of Iran. He is buried in Egypt, Cairo. Egypt also had many troops in Iraq fighting the Iranian army. And so, even if there was a street in Tehran named after the killer of Anwar Sadat, now when that's they changed the name. There was a lot of improvement in Egyptian-Iranian relations, not to replace the Gulf, but to try to mediate. But it didn't work, but at least there was a lot of messages coming from Iran toward Egypt, and Egypt would forward them to America. Today, we have the Egyptian foreign minister is in the States, meeting the foreign secretary, Marco Rubio, also trying to mediate and push for a ceasefire because the area is not going to be happy if this war continues. Take into consideration that the history of this area had always seen foreign intervention changing it. And so when Prime Minister Netanyahu began to talk about a new Middle East, that was alarming. Now America and using Israel are trying to change the area and reshape it. And I think that the aim is to make the whole Middle East an American zone of influence, control the oil like our Chinese colleague mentioned. If you remember, China, the policy that also requires the oil. And this is also very important to make sure that China is contained and at the same time give Israel the main hegemonic power in the area. And of course, that is not what Egypt would like, and also other regional countries like that's why you have the so-called rising Islamic Sunni alliance, Pakistan, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Egypt, because they do not accept that Israel becomes the main hegemon in the area. So this is the situation, and they tried, of course, to make sure that the misunderstanding that Egypt is siding with Iran, Egypt is not siding with Iran. Some public opinion, most of the public opinion, not only Egypt but in the whole area, support Iran when it attacks Israel, but not when it attacks Gulf states. And so this is also, you take it into consideration to understand this kind of misunderstanding. In fact, you have some, the regimes in the Gulf and the people in the Gulf look at
So, Said,
Iran
can you
as
hear?
the main enemy because they feel it. But most of the Arab countries, they look at Israel as the main enemy. Yeah, go ahead.
So, the point, it is quite obvious that without shooting a single missile at Egypt, Iran has hurt Egypt financially in terms of remittances, in terms of revenues from the Suez Canal, and also it is quite possible that many people in the Gulf could lose their jobs because of how the economies have been damaged, especially in Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, and they might have to go back. So there is clearly a lot of damage to Egypt as a result of this US-Israeli war. So my question to you is, the way I see the Abraham Accords is that the Arabs have a preference for Israeli hegemony rather than an Iranian hegemony. And they are in this position where they have to say, okay, do we live under the hegemony of Iran or do we live under the hegemony of Israel? And the whole idea of the Abrahamic Accords is, okay, we prefer Israelis over Iran. Is that how you see it, or am I missing something?
Our public opinion always look at Israel as a number one enemy. But of course, what happened in the Gulf, and they saw that Iran is attacking them. Of course, they look at Iran as also a danger. Is it a replacement? I mean, do we like an Iranian hegemony instead of Israeli hegemony? No. They just there is this public sympathy with Iran. This is the center of resistance that is fighting the American and Israeli at the same time. So they look at them as something very. I mean, this is the legacy that we will have in the Middle East, that Iran will remain the only real revolution that stood against the Americans and the Israelis, whereas our Arab regimes were all, could not do anything. And that's what it continues. That's what we are seeing. We don't see that Iran is going to replace anybody. Iran has been destroyed economically, militarily, and so this is very clear. We don't see that it will be in the future. But if the Americans reach a kind of a settlement with the Iranians, that can be problematic for the Gulf states and Israel. The Gulf states have benefited from the fact that Iranian oil is out.
Yeah.
And now if the Iranian oil is back in the global market and they have enough money for reconstruction. This is not the case with a country like Syria that depended on the Saudi and Qatari fund for reconstruction. So the Syrians, of course, are worried today what would happen to them if the Gulf states would invest more money on the reconstruction of their own oil installation rather than Syria. That is going to be problematic for them. Also, Gaza. Gaza was supposed to get money also from the Gulf. It is not coming now. There are other priorities that are emerging now for the Gulf states that they have to look at what is happening in their own backyard rather than go far away. So this is the situation.
Uh, I want to come back to you, Rafa. And there's one side story that is going on, which is this battle between Donald Trump and Pope. I don't know whether you follow American media that closely, but Sean Hannity, a very right-wing host on Fox News, announced in a very dramatic fashion that as of today, he's not a Catholic anymore. So there is a lot of hate towards the Pope that is being expressed from right-wing MAGA. Even though, if you notice, the Trump administration is dominated by Catholics. J.D. Vance is a Catholic. Marco Rubio is Catholic. Kennedy is Catholic. Even Caroline Levitt is Catholic. So there are a lot of Catholics in the administration, but they are put in an. So, are you surprised by the Pope and how resolutely he's standing up to Donald Trump? Is there a strategy behind it? Is he fighting for Christianity? Like, what is this? I'm quite surprised. I mean, I'm very happy, especially the fact that he's an American on top of that. So there's a sub-theme, I think, that is irritating Donald Trump more because he's an American who is not listening to him. So how do Europeans see this, especially Catholic countries like Italy?
Well, the attack was surprising. The fact that the Vatican is criticizing US policies, this is not novelty. Even with the previous Pope, for instance, the condemnation in Gaza was very clear. And to some extent, so there is a continuity from the previous Pope to the current Pope. Their position, for instance, on Gaza and Lebanon has been always the same. I mean, it has not changed. So what has changed is the reaction from Washington. Now, that was surprising. Now, why was that? I mean, clearly the Pope expresses a certain public opinion in Europe. While the governments, I told you earlier, are a bit half-half. I mean, they criticize this, but not too much. They don't want to break up with the US. Think about that. The first official reaction from the European Union was to criticize the Iranian reaction against the Gulf countries. Not to criticize the US attack, but criticize the reaction. But anyway, so European elites are a bit, and policymakers are a bit half-half, but public opinion, no, it's very strongly against the US. So to some extent, I think that attacking the Pope is also an attempt to conquer Rome to some extent. Like, i.e., I attack you, I threaten you, I tell you you have been elected thanks to me, and you know that your finance depends heavily from the money coming from the US. So be careful for the future. Try to align yourself with me, otherwise you are going to pay the consequence. So it's a future-oriented attack, I think. That's the impression. Future, because of course Trump knows that if he somehow is able to win the Vatican, then significant portion of public opinion in Europe will be won as well. Now, is this going to happen? I don't think so. I mean, this is really, I mean, the reaction, in fact, was even a government that is super aligned, like the Italian government, even Meloni reacted to that and said, no, between Trump and the Pope, I'm staying with the Pope, which was, and of course, Trump reacted and then say, okay, you are unacceptable, you will be punished. So, I mean, it's, I think commentators also look at the competition, yes, in the North American religious market. On the one hand, true, Catholic vote was important for the Trump election. On the other hand, a long-term race, yes, there is a competition, of course, between Catholic and Episcopalian and different Protestant parts of the Christian world in the US. And so, to some extent, maybe from a Trumpian perspective, it is also trying to go deeper on this cleavage. But the feeling is that for the moment, at least, this was a failure. I mean, all the leaders and the Vatican stood up very firmly. So for the short term, it's counterproductive, self-defeating. Medium long term, okay, maybe that's a different story. Maybe that was the plan to attack now to get benefits tomorrow. We will see.
To me, it appears that is the Pope worried that there is a sort of demeaning of Christianity in the way the Trump administration is using Christianity. We had this very funny moment where Secretary of War Pete Hegseth quoted the Bible, and it was not actually from the Bible. The verse was from a movie, Pulp Fiction, and it shows that these people are trying to use religion in spite of their ignorance. So do you think there is some dimension that I want to save Christianity from Donald Trump? You think that could be?
Let's say there is there is a spiritual and theological dimension, but there is also a political and financial dimension. I told you, I mean, the American Catholic Church is an important financial component of the global Catholic Church. But the feeling is that the American Catholic Church, a number of important prominent bishops, aligned with the Pope against Trump. So the feeling from Rome was that if Trump is not able to gain and regain somehow the support from the Pope in the future, this will also have an impact on the midterm elections. So again, a very risky business from Trump administration on this. I mean, if it is true that the Catholics proved important for his election, now attacking an important constituency a few months before the election, it's not a very smart move. Unless you are able that you are going to win them in few weeks, their support. But this is not the perception.
Recording in progress.
Thank you, Saeed. All right.
And maybe the other point I wanted to suggest was we were talking about winners. In Europe, there is also a certain perception that Russia is not sort of performing badly in this war.
Yeah.
It has less pressure on Ukraine. Trump suspended some sanctions. There are a number of important oil companies in Italy saying we need to start buying again oil and gas from Russia. So Russia, at the end of the day, may get some important gains out of this.
Well, Russia right now is selling without discount to most countries. And there's a lot of rumors going on in the US that Trump is trying some back channel discussions with Russia through Belarus. And it is quite possible that he's going to completely abandon the Ukrainian cause and make some kind of an agreement. And that would be very, I think for Europe, it will be quite a problem. I think that would be a betrayal of Europe. Don't you think so?
Yes, I mean, the feeling here in Europe is that there was an interesting poll by Politico yesterday, and it showed that the majority of the interviewed prefer to be under China than under this US Trump-led government, which was very striking. I mean, just a poll, but the overall idea in Europe, at least in a significant part of the European constituency, is that we need to wake up and to push much more on European strategic autonomy, because the transatlantic alliance is highly unreliable. Some, as you know, are also thinking about that this is the end of the West. So there is a clear perception that the reliability of the US is at its minimum, and so Europe needs to set up an emergency plan leading to an increase in its autonomy. It will be a long path, maybe 15, 20 years, but this is growingly clear to Europeans.
Pinglock, there is a lot of chatter as to who is winning and who is losing this war. It is quite possible that Iran may come out with a lot of control on the Strait of Hormuz. So it would appear as if Iran has gained something significantly, even though it's suffering much damage. But from the Chinese perspective, I think these two wars must be like a boon to China, right? With the entire West focused first on Ukraine since 2022, and then now focused on Gaza, and then focused on Iran. So all of this is taking the Americans, shall we say, they're dropping the ball, so to speak, on China, right? Not focusing on the geopolitical and economic challenge that China is posing. And now, for example, there was an interesting article yesterday in the South China, what's it called? Morning Post, right?
South China Morning Post.
Yeah. So they had an article as to how Quad hasn't met, right? In the Quad summit, India was the president this whole year. There was no Quad summit with the heads, and maybe Rubio might go in May to India. But that shows that China has kind of escaped the kind of attention that the Western elite want to put, the pressure that they want to put on China to contain its economic and geopolitical growth. Do you see that this is a great opportunity for China to continue to grow faster and faster while the US remains quagmired in these European and Middle Eastern wars?
Well, yes, as I said, even some scholar analyzing that is talking about the war in the Middle East also pose a challenge to talk about even the potential collapse of the U.S. construct order, particularly after the Second World War as well. Because, for example, even you talk about the war in Middle East now, and of course, not just talk about the war between Iran, Israel, and also the U.S., but even all other, countries in the Middle East also suffer. And you can also understand that is even now, that is so-called some U.S. alliance countries in the Middle East, they becomes the target, from Iran as well. So some will even think about, what will be the cost if that is talk about the potential alliance with the U.S., for example, in Asia as well. Because, for example, talk about Asia, economically, you see almost all Asian countries also depends on China, and even Japan or many other South Asia countries as well. But talk about the security dimension, some will even choose to the US, talk about the security dimension. But after the war in the Middle East, maybe they will reconsider their current relationship with the US as well. Because, you can say they will, at least that may not be so possible, to talk about the fully guarantee from the US side if you might have a chance to be dragged into war as well. So I see this time, if we talk about some potential winner, maybe also China will gain some benefits, from this war. If we talk about that is whether talking about the growing influence, not just talk about, in some other region, but also, for example, in Asia as well. So I think that is more likely to happen. And second, of course, you talk about the soft power as well, because I believe that most China's scholars also will analyze in the same way that is actually China, the US is now losing the soft power as well, because you talk about for a long time, particularly after the Second World War, you would like to construct the so-called international law and also try to maintain, the so-called long-term peace and security as well. And now, not just talk about the war in the Middle East, but even earlier talk about, the capture of a leader in Venezuela as well. So I think, but that is talk about next what Chinese leader will do, because first of all, I don't know whether you also observe that is even after the war, that is also the first two-session meeting in China. Actually, Wang Yi, the Chinese foreign minister, first visit Vietnam, and that is the first country, after China finished the two-session meeting. And that was significant in a way because also I would say that China would also like to send a signal, to see, for example, China would like to secure stability, particularly related to South China Sea as well. And next, you will also see just recently, Taiwanese leader, Chiang Kai-shek, Kuomintang leader. Also with Beijing, I believe that is stability is one of the signals that would like to send out to the world. And I believe, that is even quite attractive, to most other countries in the world. Particularly, we'll also see as I mentioned earlier, most suffer, from the war as well. So I think that would be very likely, that is, if we would like to say, if you also believe in great power competition, and some will even say that may be a very critical, moment. That is whether China can fully gain from this, war, and also see obtaining more and more that is support from, for example, traditional American alliance. Because to me, I think that is much more important. That is, we talk about Belt and Road countries. China already gained much support, even since 2013 when Xi Jinping first initiated the Belt and Road Initiative. But to most talk about traditional Western allies, that is a big question mark in the past. But now after the war, I think, you can also see some maybe also will think about whether they will also talk about, more close to China as well. So this is my personal view.
Yeah, I think it was just this week that Sanchez of Spain signed several memorandums of understanding with China. I find from a philosophical perspective, I think we talk about the global order after World War II, but I think there was a break and slight changes in the global order after the collapse of the Soviet Union, where the US enjoyed a unipolar moment in 1991. So I think the order that was established after Clinton became president, so from 1992 onwards, the biggest beneficiary of the global order is undoubtedly China. Nobody has benefited. So why would China want this global order to change if it is the biggest beneficiary from this order, right? It should be in China's interest to help the United States maintain the order that has made China such a rich and powerful country.
Well, you are talking about even a relatively long period of China joining the new world order as well. You're talking about in the early 1990s, that would be perhaps talking about the early phase, of China joining the new global order.
Yeah.
But of course, later see, you can also, at that point, China was not the second largest economies in the world, but now that will be totally different story. But you can also see while China has been gaining more economic power, perhaps China would also like to gain more political or even other power as well. So not just talking about, that is in the economic dimension. If you also look at, for example, the establishment of AIIB, that is also talking about whether as an alternative, to the World Bank, also IMF as well. Because, China, I also agree that actually China benefit a lot, particularly after joining the WTO, in 2001 as well. But now the world has changed a lot, compared with 1990s or even early 21st century as well. So when China see, if that is so-called the opportunities for them, probably they will also talking about the rise of the global south and also other regions as well. And that may be even, better. I think that is for China, not just talking about thinking about their position, global position as well. And would like to see how even our world will look like after 10 or even 20 years. Because you can also see the past 5 years, not just talk about the war in Ukraine. Actually, we have so many conflicts as well. If you believe that also, not just talk about great power competition, but also we tend to becomes a multipolar world, and some scholar also analyze that as not as stable as unipolar world. So if China would like to see unipolar, may be more attractive to other powers in the world, other countries in the world, and perhaps you can also see it is also trying to construct a new order, and that's why I would say the war in the Middle East is a very critical moment. But let's see, because this is talking about the transition moment, and I believe not just talk about the world from China, but that is actually collective action, particular from other countries as well.
Sarah, I want to turn to South Asia and ask you a very simple question, really. Do you think that this growing prominence of Pakistan and also the position that India has taken, just 3 days before the war, Prime Minister Modi was in Israel saying that I say with full conviction that India stands with Israel. And is there going to be some repercussions for India in the Gulf? Because India not only did say that it stands with Israel, but India has yet to condemn either Israel or the US for this war. I mean, listening to Rafa, it's very clear that the Europeans see this as an illegal war, and most people, even Americans, see this as an illegal war. The only people who have not said anything is the Indian government on this illegality. So is there going to be a price for India to pay in the Middle East? And do you see that the balance of power between India and Pakistan has changed a bit because of the growing diplomatic clout of Pakistan and India's marginalization a little bit because of this war? You're muted, Sarah. Sarah, can you unmute yourself? Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Before this war was started, Indian Prime Minister paid the visit to the Israel, and as you mentioned, that he said that Israel is the, I think, is the brother of the India or something. He made some nearest relation with Israel.
Well, he said that India is motherland
India
and
is
Israel is fatherland.
Motherland. India is motherland, Israel the fatherland, and soon after the Israel attacked Iran, and that was worst humanitarian crisis we have seen. The world have seen the first humanitarian crisis in Iran. When you see is as the perspective of international human right law, international humanitarian law, and the rights of the children and rights of the women, every perspective explains worst humanitarian crisis in Iran. So at that time, India was quiet, and India even didn't condemn what was going on in Iran. And on the other hand, when Iran attacked, Indian parliamentarians were condemning Iran's attack on the Israel when Iran was defending its soil. So it was admitted by the many Indian parliamentarians, many Indian foreign relation experts like Shashi Tharoor, that India is not doing well, and indeed this was India's worst foreign policy era during Modi. Their foreign policy is declining day by day, but during Iran-Israel war, the stance they have taken, they are going to face major setback. We have seen yesterday that their oil tankers were stuck at the Strait of Hormuz, and Iran didn't allow them to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. So this is they are going to face at the same time that they are having they were involved in Chabahar. They were using the Chabahar port, and they wanted to use Chabahar port, and they were discussing some project for further using the Chabahar port. But we will see the relation, Indian and Iran relations. We are not going to see the post-war relations are the same as those were in the past. So there in international relations, there are no one is permanent enemy, no one is permanent friend. If there is anything permanent, that is in trust. So if tomorrow it will in the best interest of the Iran or India, they will coordinate and they will engage in the terms again. So this is possible in international politics. When it comes to Pakistan, that Pakistan is going to enjoy, or did Pakistan balance something in South Asia? Pakistan, as I discussed right now, that Pakistan was perceived wrongly in the world. Pakistan wasn't as weak as it was perceived or as it was portrayed by the India to the world. It was portrayed as a weakened state to the world. Pakistan at the same time, if we talk about right now, if we talk about even last year Iran-Israel war, Pakistan was engaged, Pakistan was playing the mediator role. And if right now, if we talk about the current situation, Pakistan's Prime Minister, Pakistan as a country tried its best to resolve this issue between Iran and America, and this isn't a small job. Right now, we were just discussing. You were getting the point from the Chinese representative. He was talking about the multipolarity. So, if multipolarity were in a world of the multipolar, so Pakistan has realized that the world order is going to change, and Pakistan Pakistan has understood something fundamental that is fracturing world order. And Pakistan is not, Pakistan wasn't weak. Pakistan is not dependent. Pakistan is actually, this is actually a doctrine. So Pakistan's role in current era, Pakistan's role, the Pakistan's prime minister have been in 3 countries. Yesterday came back. Pakistan's military leadership was in Tehran for the 3 days, and Pakistan's military leadership made Iran agree to open the Strait of Hormuz. That Strait of Hormuz, which is blocked for the superpower, that is blocked for the, even if we are talking about India, that is blocked for the Indian oil tankers cannot pass through. So this was made by the Pakistan to open the Strait of Hormuz. That is another question why it got closed again. So Pakistan wasn't perceived well by the world, but this was the time that Pakistan star is rising. The world is knowing what this is actual Pakistan. So what I am saying is, seeing the post-Iran war era, I am seeing Pakistan much more geopolitically strong country. If now we are talking about the world is no more unipolar world. World is actually multipolarity. So in a multipolar world, Pakistan will play a central role. In a multipolar polar world, the different great powers, they need some polycentric country to agree on. Russia has good relation with Pakistan. Russia is they are good. We have good relations in Russia. Pakistan is liked by the United States. Pakistan is enjoying very good and cordial relation with China. So when Pakistan is near to big 3 superpowers, so Pakistan is going to enjoy the good position in post-Iran war. So when it comes to the Indian foreign policy, it is not about only about America or the issue of the Iran-Israel. We have seen that India has a good relation with its neighboring country. When you see the Bhutan, Maldives, Pakistan, China, Bangladesh, so who is left in Indian neighbor country? India has good relation.
But to push back a little bit on that, in the last 2 years, Pakistan has had a military conflict with India, with Afghanistan, and also a military exchange with Iran. So I want to turn to Saeed. Welcome back into your beautiful study. One of the sub-themes that is going on in the Gulf is that being friendly with the United States did not prove to be safe. So, in fact, this whole idea that having American bases, which were supposed to make you feel safe, have made you the magnet of the attack. They became the exact opposite. There's also a perception that the US has not done enough to protect these countries, and the US seems to be only interested in protecting Israel, but not its other Arab allies. So, is there a realization in the Arab world that America is just Israel's friend, but not really a friend of other countries? So what is the alternatives? Like Qatar seems to be having second thoughts about its relation. But the problem with Qatar is it was friendly with Iran, but Iran still attacked it. It was friendly with the US. US didn't do much to protect it. So the security dilemma is extremely, extremely sharp for the poor Gulf countries. Do you see, I mean, there's also the possibility that they might decline economically as a result of this war because of instability. Like, would you want to buy an apartment now in Dubai? I don't know. So how do you see the dilemma of the Gulf going forward? Even if we have a ceasefire and the war ends, inshallah, at the end of this week?
You hear me well? You hear me well?
Yeah, I can hear you well.
The Saudi and the Americans had an agreement in 1945 that the Americans would protect the oil. And then when the revolution in Iran 1979 erupted, the issue about Gulf security began to rise and began to be a big problem. And then it proved it when you had the Iraq invading Kuwait, and you had a big international coalition, the Americans led it, and ever since that time, there were many attempts that regional powers would protect the Gulf. There was something called the Damascus Declaration. Countries, Egypt and Syria, would get money and send troops to the Gulf. The Gulf said, no, we will take American bases. The American bases, since last year, not in the recent war, but in last year when Israel attacked Doha to kill Hamas, and the American failed to protect them, there was this concern that the Americans have a priority, which is Israel, not the Gulf. Immediately, the Saudis signed a defense treaty with Pakistan. And I think after this war, they don't have really alternative. They have to stay at least in the short term with the Americans. They may buy more weapons. They may expand the middle power alliances with Turkey, Pakistan, Egypt. But when it comes to foreign powers, there is also disappointment with Russia and China. Both China and Russia did not deliver the same assistance and protection that Israel got from the Americans. Where is the Chinese and Russian protection of Iran? The Russians said that we are so bogged down in Ukraine, we are fighting NATO. But what about China? This is their interest. So when we talk about multipolar world, where is the multipolar world in the Middle East?
No, that's a very good question. That I think probably Rafa understands this. He teaches IR theory. Technically, what we mean when we say that this is a global order is that there is a structure in place, and that structure either allows you to do something and does not allow you to do certain things. If this was a multipolar world, then Donald Trump should not be able to do what he's doing, going and attacking anywhere. And then once again, today, the chatter about Greenland has started again, all over again in the US. So for the Gulf, you think that they think that because China did not do much to protect Iran, there is no alternative to the US, so they will just stay with the US? Is that what you see in the short term?
I think we are expanding middle power alliances, and we will also keep the Americans and the Chinese and the Russians, but we'll keep in mind that when times of trouble, they have their own interests and their own agenda that does not protect them. If this war ends, the whole Middle East will be in the American sphere of influence, in the American zone. And that, of course, will have an impact on Russia and China. The strategy of containing China is being applied now when they control the oil of Venezuela, the Gulf states, and later on Iran. I don't know how this will happen. It depends on what happens to the regime, because the Gulf states and Israel will not, and even Trump will not allow the same regime in Tehran continue. It is impossible for them to continue.
If there is a peace agreement, if a strong peace agreement between Iran and the US, then yes, you could say the entire Middle East will be in the US's pocket, so to speak, including Iran. So this is the last round of questions that I have for all of you. Only one comment, one question, like what in your way is the biggest takeaway from this war? And we will go in the reverse order. We will start with Saeed. What in your view is the biggest takeaway, one takeaway from this war for you? And then we will go to Saira, then Winlock Hung, and then end with Raphael. Go ahead, Saeed.
There is so much interdependency in the world today. That's why if something happens in the Gulf, the whole world is affected. And the fact that many developing countries like India, Pakistan, and Egypt depend on workers' remittances, they have to reconsider the economic priorities, and we have to reconsider policies. They cannot live all the time on a few million people who work outside to support back home. And if something happens, then your economy is at a crossroad. This has to be reconsidered. Also, they have to reconsider, the alliances with all those superpowers because they have their own agenda, and if this agenda clashes with their interests, you are on your own. So they have to also boost the alliances. I think, like you see, there's a crisis with NATO. There's a crisis with all regional organizations, the Arab League, the GCC countries, Islamic Unity Organization. Where are those organizations? Are they the only one? Even the United Nations Secretary General said that at this time that we cannot, we are all suffering. All international organizations are suffering, cannot impose law and order or international law because of all this competition and all those multipolar powers competing and destroying Soviet and pure power, the system.
Thank you, Said. So basically, your takeaway is that this war shows how interdependent we all are. Saira, what is your most important takeaway? You are mute. Unmute yourself, please.
Okay. In my point of view, if I see it from Pakistan perspective, I have noticed that we are largely dependent on the other side of the world. So when it comes to Pakistan, I think Pakistan needs to work much more on its geo-economic situation. But this was Pakistan's geo-economic position that made us that we are in very critical position. We are at once we are engaged in a strategic agreement with Saudi Arabia. On the other side, we are recently we have we refunded UAE some loan. So we need to. I think Pakistan need to improve its geo-economic conditions, and we need new alliances. We need new alliances, new economic policies. Pakistan need to make. So I have also analyzed that we are very dependent on the other side of the world. We have seen that the one part of the closure of the one part of the world can block the whole world. So new organizations, regional organizations, new economic alliances and strategic military alliances are needed of the time.
Winglock, one takeaway of yours, like what have you learned about, what is your biggest takeaway from this war?
Well, to me, I think the biggest takeaway we talk about that is the U.S. global hegemony will become it will not be sustainable. That is, I think, that is the biggest takeaway. And of course, some we even mentioned about the UN is no longer functioning.
And you can't stop smiling while saying that.
Well, this is quite difficult to pronounce, but that is talking about, I think that is the biggest takeaway as well, because even though, some may even question about whether the UN is, no longer functioning. But actually, I also met a UN expert, I think 2 years ago in Hong Kong as well. You can't deny the fact that there are also many brilliant experts, working for the UN, and then they are actually also thinking of some other possible ways, to whether, for example, either reform or even both, to build a new organization. And that is, we must talk about, declining influence of the US, and probably not just talk about China, maybe even some other, regional power like the EU or even African Union as well, because that would be, I think, possible to see how we can even look for some alternative to maintain long-term peace and stability. But the biggest takeaway, I think, that is talk about, the declining power of the US.
Raphael, how do you see this?
Well, I see the US behavior as a very risky behavior. I interpret this as an effect of the decline of the US and an attempt, as Trump said it clearly, to revert this decline. I'm not sure the US will be able to achieve this. As I said, it's a very risky thing. I mean, it's maybe easy too early to assess it. But one thing is clear to me, at least for the Middle East, that this war gave a chance to Iran to project a certain power in the Gulf, to bomb and destroy significant infrastructures in all the neighboring countries, somehow proving that Iran can keep them under pressure. So to some extent, despite what one might think, I see Iran coming out of this conflict with some important gains.
We will see what happens. Donald Trump threatened to destroy civilization, but he desperately looking for an off-ramp from this opportunity. So I think there's this is the third attempt at regime change that the U.S. has made in the Middle East. They tried in Afghanistan, and Taliban is still there. They tried in Iraq. I don't know what to make of Iraq right now, but that's certainly not what the U.S. was aspiring. And they wanted regime change in Iran. So this is the third time that U.S. military power has failed to achieve its political goals. So in that sense, we could say that either the U.S. is declining or the relevance of military power is declining in the world that we live in. But thank you very much for all of you to join me and make such interesting points. Extremely grateful. Saeed, in spite of your tiring flight back, you are here. And for Winglock, it's past midnight there, as I can see. So thank you very much. Rafa, great host for me. And Saira, thank you very much for joining. Thank you very much for being on Khanversations. And